I'd like to welcome you all for coming. We have a pretty full schedule today, so we're going to go ahead and get started. As more people come in, then they can just join us. We have two presentations today. The first one covers faculty evaluation as far as tenure, merit, promotion, and so on. And it includes Dr. Jeff Briggs, who you've met before, who's our interim provost, and Dr. Paul Faber, who is our dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. And then Dr. Jeanette Naylor-Tingnell, who is an associate professor of psychology and also the president of AAUP. So this one's pretty pertinent because when we conducted a survey in spring of 2016 of faculty, we had about 200 respond to that survey. And the highest indicated need for faculty development, believe it or not, was actually in the area of research, and the second highest was in help dealing with tenure, promotion, and merit. So faculty indicated across the board at Fort Hays that this was their second highest area that they'd like help with, support with, and so on. This is going to cover a lot of information. We will go ahead and pull the PowerPoint, put it into Curator, and add it to the blog, and other items like that. I can send it out to you. We can put anywhere that you need it that helps you. So following that, then Dr. Song-Ki Min, who is right here, will join us. Vice President of Institutional Assistant Vice President of Institutional Effectiveness. We'll join with Dr. Naylor-Tingnell to discuss the course evaluation instrument and how that feeds into evaluation. Okay?
Well, thank you, Nicole. As we have a number of things that we're going to cover, and one of the things I want to emphasize is we're going to talk a lot about the process and timelines and really provide you much more surface coverage of this than really in depth. And so if you feel like there's a need to come back and do a specific session on a particular area, whether that be annual performance review or on the merit process that's associated with annual performance review, or on tenure and promotion aspects, we'd be more than willing to put a group together, and so we can really be more intent on one of those areas. The other thing I want to say is if you have a question at any time, this is your session, so please interrupt and ask a question. We want this to be as responsive to your needs as possible. So our slides really give us just a direction to go, and then so we try and cover a host of things. We'll make sure and then let us know if something comes in so we can address that. Will actually go much better. We push a particular button here. Right turn, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Paul.
Okay. This session, of course, is about understanding faculty evaluation, and any evaluation always begins with some standard that one is trying to meet. Well, for all of us, our standards are set at different levels. Of course, there are expectations. Actually, there are expectations set by the Kansas Board of Regents for the university as a whole. But here we have it listed as starting with university. The university has some goals. Different sorts. They come down to college and department level expectations. Some colleges have more expectations at the college level than others. Like, for example, I think in the College of Business and Entrepreneurship, there are college level expectations. In arts, humanities, and social sciences, we don't do much with the college level, it's just the departmental level. Those produce a couple of documents that are relevant to you. There's an annual statement of responsibilities, and probably you together with your chair have developed that for this fall semester here right now. And then there is a longer term faculty development plan. Those are 3-year plans in theory, though they can be modified. But that's setting up the expectations in the first place. Then we go on to a couple of different sorts. This is the big map, and then we'll go into these pieces, so I won't talk too much about it right now. But there's an annual performance review, which is, of course, looking at how well you did in meeting those expectations in the past year. Connected with that is a merit recommendation. As I say, we'll get back to that here a little bit more. That's the same process, but it's a separate aspect of it. Tenure review is for those of you who are on or in the tenure track. There's an annual tenure review, and promotion is also a review by one's colleagues, though that is not an annual process, and it is something that would come up only periodically. So these expectations set up kind of the goals, and the review is always, the evaluation is always to try to figure out how well is one doing in meeting those goals, but especially with an eye toward improving the quality the next year. It's not designed as a punishment or, as a system trying to mete out punishment. It's rather an improvement, a quality improvement system. Well, let's see, what do we have coming up next year? Okay.
I would also add that we also have post-tenure review now.
We do have post-tenure review.
Second review, and second cycle of that.
Yes, yes, which would come up at the earliest 6 years after one had been granted tenure, and quite possibly even later than that. Okay, so this is kind of saying the same thing, that there are these three different kinds of reviews, but I wanted to point out that the memorandum of agreement, the memorandum of agreement between Fort Hays State University, or between the Kansas Board of Regents really, and the Fort Hays chapter of the American Association of University Professors, or that is AAUP. The memorandum of agreement is the contract, it's the authorizing document for all of these different kinds of review that are in here. This is a live link here actually, so that when Nicole sends it out to you, you can go to the MOA or pretty close to it by clicking on that. Okay, so then we've got just a little bit more about each of these three levels. So next, I don't know, Jeff, you want to say anything here about the annual performance review?
Annual performance review is conducted for everyone within faculty rank, and that, as Dr. Faber mentioned, we have an annual statement of responsibility that is completed, but it's supposed to be completed by December 15th of each year, and so you may be in process with that, or we'll be working on that process here coming very soon, and those annual statements of responsibility will be loaded into the system. And then we work on a calendar year review cycle for annual performance review. So from January 1 to December 31. So we're kind of and we've been, how's that work? We've been on academic year. I think when I came here, we're on calendar year. We went back to academic year. We've now been back to calendar year for a while, and there are pluses and minuses to each one. And I know what my preference is, and I'm not even going to share that. But so our annual performance review then is done following the calendar year, and so that begins in the spring. And so we have the timelines. The SR is due for the following year on December 15, and then about February 15, the annual performance review folio is due to the department chair, and as listed there, it's based on the previous whole calendar year or part of the calendar year as a new hire. So it would just be from August to December. You'd share what your accomplishments were during that time. And we'll have, I believe, we have the full time, or there's a link to the full timeline here. We have actually the timeline
as the next slide.
General, as the next slide. The annual statement of responsibilities have been done in an electronic format, which turns into paper previously, but that's actually transitioning into a workday function that's being developed and tested out this spring. So the first set of annual statements of the annual statement of responsibility for this coming year will actually be implemented in Workday for the following year. So our December will be loaded up. Process stays the same. It's just a different management tool for that. And then the annual performance review, you'll too often in my mind you hear it as merit review. It's not merit review, it's annual performance review, that then merit is part of that process. The annual performance review is used as a basis for a merit recommendation. The only salary changes we have for faculty are to be meritorious in nature, rather with some exceptions. So at the end of, typically ends up being fairly late in the spring when we get an idea of what our merit pool is going to be, and then depending upon your unit's process for distributing merit, a person's salary adjustment would be implemented in that merit pool. So if you have a 3% merit pool, which would be actually a pretty good year for us, then that dollar amount would be distributed to each department to divvy up among the faculty based upon the performance within that group. So it's very departmentally managed and has worked out reasonably well, other than its merit. The state of Kansas has created some challenges for us in salary adjustment. Institutionally, we've actually done better than most, in fact, better than all in the Regent system because of our enrollment profile and our growth model. So we were able to make some adjustments this year that included the merit process plus some other modified process this year, which worked out quite well. Any questions on annual performance review? Jeanette, any big things we're missing here?
No.
So, and every department functions a little bit differently. So I would recommend that you visit with your unit supervisor to understand what kind of things are we looking for during this annual performance review. And in traditional teaching, we're looking at evidence of teaching excellence, scholarly productivity, and service involvement, and then getting an understanding of how is scholarship defined in our unit. What's acceptable scholarship, what does not really meet the definition of scholarship in a particular unit. And all units have varying, while the MOA clearly describes the range of things that are considered scholarship on this campus, each unit may have differentiated expectations relative to the level of publication, professional presentation, and how undergraduate research is valued, etc.
And those should be outlined in a set of criteria that should be accessible to you.
Right. Every department should have those criteria accessible, and then they're departmentally, they have to be approved by the dean and the provost, but they're departmentally driven.
If that criteria changes, like I noticed in our department, it was generated in 2007. If that changes, what happens if you're in process?
The merit, well, I'm going to answer this two ways. When we're talking about merit, it would be, you would assume that it would apply, changes would apply to the next cycle. As you establish your ASR and you establish your performance outcomes, you're building those off of whatever the merit process is. So that would be for the next cycle. It gets a little stickier when you talk about tenure and promotion, because that's a 6-year, typically a 6-year process, with the 7th year being the defining year. And so usually then if that becomes a little different if a merit, tenure items change, especially late in someone's tenure criteria. But I don't, that really hasn't been a problem.
From my experience, it has not been a problem. There has been at least one department in the College of Arts and Sciences, as it was before a couple of years ago, that explicitly took note of that. I mean, that is, they were making some changes to their criteria, but they explicitly noted that this applies to all who are hired after, or who join the faculty after such and such a date. I mean, the date of adoption of the new criteria and stuff. And so it hasn't been a problem for us, although I think, as Jeff says, you could get into a sticky thing if the department really thought they ought to go a considerably different direction, 2 years after someone had been hired or something like that.
I'm just going to speak for Paul and I, and this is, I've got the interim provost tag, but my real career in the last 14 years has been as a dean. And I think what we've always tried to do is be faculty-centric in those sorts of situations, and work not to disadvantage faculty. So we take a look, okay, here are some criteria change. Let's make sure that the faculty, that an individual faculty is not disadvantaged by this particular change if it doesn't seem, if it would have a negative outcome. And Tony, I think your department's may be going through some review
we're getting ready
now. We've had that conversation about how does this.
And so if for example, you're on that track, you're on the tenure track, the criteria has changed, the proper due process that you would have is that person coming in is under the old criteria unless they affirmatively elect to be under the new criteria. And that's probably the wiser way to go, because the person who enters into that stream of the tenure process knows the rules ahead of time. And so they should be able to elect which rules apply to them at that point in time. It's a little bit of trouble for the department, but it avoids any due process concerns. Yeah. And we haven't run into anything from AAUP's side where that's been a problem. And I think, to echo both Jeff and Paul, we've been very faculty centric here, and it's very good for us.
And incidentally, we didn't introduce Tony at all, but this is Tony Gable, who is, well, of course, any party is better with Tony. Tony is also here as a representative, as one of the leadership team, member of the leadership team of the AAUP.
So this next slide provides the timeline, and this was redone in 2012. I think that's about the time we went back to the calendar year review cycle. And so we started the start of the calendar year with that, where on February 15, a faculty submits the annual performance document to the department chair. And so you have about 6 weeks after the first of the year to get your materials together, again, demonstrating your excellence in teaching, your activities in scholarship, as well as in your activities in service and any supporting documentation. I would recommend with that, again, that as a new unit member, you talk to folks within the department and talk to the department chair or unit leader and say, what do we typically do? As some put together full portfolios, some put together very simplistic documentation. I've seen the full range, and so just what you don't want to do is underestimate the process and making sure that you have appropriate documentation. And then by April 1, the chair is to review each of the individual faculty members and to discuss the evaluation, and in many cases then the merit process is also discussed. You're going to qualify for so much merit depending on how it's distributed. What we've done the last few years, few might be about 10, I suppose now, is we've been just later and later each year because of the state budget management issues and the legislative delay. We don't have any idea what the budget's going to look like. We don't know what our merit pool is going to be. So what we have done is just made all merit calculations based on a 1% merit pool. And then if it's actually more than that, then we just use that multiplier to make the adjustment. If it's less than that, we would use a multiplier as well. We've we've never had less than 1% unless it was at 0. And we've only had
Yeah.
0 a few times in my time here. Which is
Though,
2 years.
yeah, so, I mean, just to add a little bit to that, though, really that is negotiated between the AAUP and representatives of the central administration. And there have been cases where there is an effort to, well, right some past wrongs in some way, or maybe it's too strong to call it a past wrong, but I mean, that is, for example, this year, wasn't the merit really based on the hire of the last 2 years?
Right, because we didn't have merit in the previous year. We based it on whichever was the highest of the 2. So that if you did really well one year, you weren't penalized if that wasn't the year that we actually had a merit pool.
And so, right, so there, I mean, in theory, whatever, I mean, what would come out of these negotiations could be very different, but genuinely, one expects that it would be some sort of continuation of some multiplier of 1% in some way.
So last year it was negotiated that we retain $1,000 insurance premium correction, shall we call it, and then a 2% merit pool. So looking at the total budget, that ended up to be about a 3.2%, but only 2% of that was merit.
Yeah, I think just 1.5, wasn't it?
Was it
1,000
1.5?
and a 1.5.
I
might be
think
wrong.
so.
But one might be 1.5.
I think it was more than 1.5.
Okay.
I had to go back and take a look.
Yeah, I'd have to
Maybe you might be right with 2 then. Yeah.
We got pretty aggressive in negotiations in the last couple
There were
days.
lots of numbers coming
Yeah.
out.
Sounds good. Yeah, it worked out
Yeah.
great for.
But it is 3.2 was the overall.
Was the overall average.
Added to the instructional pool altogether.
And we've done that a few years over time where there's just a straight allocation for everyone, an insurance adjustment, or I know we've done $500 this last year. Everybody got $1,000 plus then that particular amount, which worked out well. And we're the only institution in the region system that did have across the board merit distribution. And it turned out great for us in tough times, so it really worked out well. So you can see the rest of these timelines, and then so as you, April and May just runs through the process. Actually, the deans review the recommendations and have to sign off on all of those. There's the opportunity to grieve the decision that's been made at the departmental level, and then that's established. Then the fall, then we're just working on the annual statement of responsibility processes. So in October, we start the conversations. By December, you should have your annual statement of responsibility fairly finalized. By December 15, those are supposed to be signed off on and finalized, which clarifies what your teaching expectations are going to be, what your plans for scholarly productivity are going to be, and your service involvement. And that's negotiable with the unit head, department chair, or dean, whoever you're responding to.
And all of these processes do have an appeal step built into every layer of review. And we would just as AAUP encourage you that if you need our help, it's better to contact us sooner rather than later. There's a lot more we can do at the first few steps than we can much later, because you cannot officially grieve a merit decision. You can appeal.
Yes, I
But
said grieve. And
yes,
that was
that to
wrong.
us means something
Right.
very different. You cannot grieve that, which is more of a legal-like process. However, we can step in and do some appeals and things like that if you.
And then the tenure process. Somebody else wants to take this? I've been talking for a long time.
You want to say anything about it, Jeanette?
Very clearly outlined as far as what happens at each step, each level of review. But essentially, year 1 and 2, they stay within your department and go as high as your chair. Year 3 through 6, I always think of them as committee supervisory level, committee supervisory level. So it goes in years 3 and 4 to the college committee, and then the dean, and then 5 and 6 to the university committee, then the provost. So if we think of them as committee supervisory, it just helps make it a little bit more sense. Again, very outlined in the MOA as to what the committees should do, what your roles and responsibilities are.
And years 1 and 2 are actually reviewed by the deans as well.
Are they?
Yeah. We had to get a little clarification on that,
Okay.
because it was a little muddy. And
I know they went to the dean. I wasn't sure.
yeah, I think we clarified that would be part of the process. So departmental committee, department chair, and then the dean. Well, and one of the things I want to say about this process, and I think maybe we talked about it when Dr. Tompkins and I visited with you a month or so ago. When I first came here, I found our tenure review process to be a little intrusive and somewhat cumbersome, because you're just doing something every year, and there are all these levels, and I had not been used to that in other institutions where I've worked and actually had gone through the tenure process. You basically show up at year 6 and you hope you're good to go. But now, even now, I want to negotiate that first year again, by the way. So even now, you've been here for 2 months and you're putting together a folio for first year review. But you get feedback, you get accumulating feedback throughout that process. So by the 3rd year, 4th year, if you're really not meeting expectations, this should be clarified in this process. You shouldn't be fooled later in the process. You should know where perhaps some gaps in your performance are. You should know if you have to improve your teaching profile or your scholarly profile, or find some other ways to be involved in service, whatever that may be. And because of the multiple levels of review and the full annual review through if you're on tenure track, through the tenure process, and then balanced up with the annual performance review in the spring. So they're two separate cycles.
A little comment I would add is this last bullet point. This is, speaking of quality and significance of one's work, is not canonical language. I mean, it doesn't come out of the MOA or something like that. But that's the way I think about what you're trying to do in making a case for merit or for tenure. You're trying to point out how well you did, what the quality of your work was in meeting the goals, but also the significance. I mean, that is, what sort of contribution, how does that make a contribution? One can think of kind of absurd examples of, doing excellent work, but on something that doesn't really make any difference. For example, my home discipline is philosophy. Perhaps one could do some excellent work on the medieval philosopher Odo of Tournai, but given our mission as a university, Odo studies are not big, really. I mean, I don't see how they
Yes,
help.
that.
Right. I am shocked.
And so one wants to, we're trying to recognize what this particular university is trying to accomplish in teaching, in scholarship, and in service, and show how the contributions then that each of us are making are contributing to that.
I would like to add one more comment here, following up what Paul said about reflection on quality. Is something that during appeals that both Jeanette and I have probably assisted with. One of the things, and now sitting on a tenure committee myself, one of the things I see where it's deficient at for some faculty is they don't take into, they do not take into mind the comments from previous year's reviewers. So for example, your department chair will review your file, your tenure committee at the department level will review it, and you'll have letters from them, and they will give you some suggestions, or they might find some weaknesses. And one of the things that I think as a university we expect is that path of growth, that trajectory of growth. And how you see that is by one, recognition that there were some of these things brought up, some of these suggestions brought up, and then how, as you as a faculty member, did you implement those suggestions? How did you address those suggestions in the following year? And then, of course, what did you learn from it? I always use the example, if you're told that things aren't working well in your class, your grade distribution isn't that great, you're giving all A's and no B's or C's or D's, you recognize that as a deficiency, and then you say, well, I'm going to do these things and hopefully spread that distribution out. And whether that plan of attack actually works for you or not, it doesn't matter what the outcome is. One, you recognized it. Two, you tried something. And three, you look at the results and say, did it work? And if it didn't work, you try something else, or you say, yeah, it actually worked, and I'm going to continue working on this. I always like to look at it as a sort of a continuous improvement process, at least from my perspective, to see the faculty growth during those 3, 4, 5 years while they're in that tenure process. It's a different culture here at Fort Hays, and that's part of the growth process, and it's reflected in your tenure file. The faculty that usually have trouble usually wait until 2 or 3 days before the file is due to their department, and that's when they put it together. The ones who don't have trouble are the ones who take it very seriously and consider this document, this tenure portfolio, as the singular most important document of their academic career. Because it is going to either give you tenure or help you make the case for tenure or not. And you need to give it the weight that it is due.
I would also seek out, I know in our department we do some informal feedback as well about, you might want to move this from this section to this section, or beef up this language here, or tone down some language there, especially in those first couple of years where it does stay a little bit more at an in-house type of situation. And we do a lot of informal mentoring, so I would suggest seeking out someone who's been through the process and really get some of that feedback about organization and structure.
And as I mentioned from the start, we would be glad to put together a session specifically on that sort of item to help and get a kind of a range of people in to get to the details of that, because it is important in there a number of processes.
I have a question on the quality of instructional, how the course evaluation kind of entered into the equation.
Course evaluations are part of the process. The student evaluations that come in, and they do provide some insight as to what a piece of the instructional evaluation profile. Those have to be tempered, because we know that there's typically a fairly low response rate, and sometimes there's a tendentiousness to the response rate. I wanted to use that because that was the Merriam-Webster word of the day yesterday. How did that? I actually got to use that. There's kind of a tendentious approach for the. I think it means some sort of a bias or something. I'm not quite sure. But
just hope you get a triple word score out of that.
That's my favorite Twitter feed, is the Merriam-Webster word of the day. Yeah, so tendentious was the word of the day yesterday.
Tangentially, then. So are you saying in the tenure process the quality and significance is what our kind of rationale for what we're doing?
I think twofold. We all may answer this differently. One, you have to clearly understand what is valued in the department. And so if it is a certain number of publications, if it's a certain level of publications, if it is certain types of presentations, you need to know kind of what that profile looks like. Also, then, it's your responsibility to build a case for your particular profile. And we've seen that really evolve over my time here. Because and especially in the college, in my prior college as it was constructed, there were some groups that looked really strictly at what counts as scholarship and we're very strictly at publication. And what we were losing out on were faculty that were doing just tremendous work with undergraduate research especially, and not doing as much large-scale publishing, but multiple, probably smaller profile publications, but involving students. And which I personally find exceptionally valuable in an institution like ours. And eventually those departments have evolved their thinking to value that. Understanding where does grants personship fit in? Where does, how do professional presentations and what type of presentations, how does their value align with a publication? And the kind of the full scale of what counts. So I say both are important.
I guess I would add a little point here. In the MOA, there is a very important sentence that says, and I'm not sure I'm quoting it exactly word for word here, but it says something very close to this. It says that tenure is not a right, but will be granted when a candidate meets the requirements and when it is in the best long-term interest of the university. So I bring that up in answer to your question because another way of putting it would be what you are trying to show colleagues outside of your immediate circle. I mean, remember, this goes from your department, then a couple of years later to the college and to the university as a whole. You're trying to show that your continued membership in the community is in the best long-term interest of the university. I mean, again, typically in the teaching, in the research, in the service, though it might be different levels. I mean, that is, it might be one person's greatest area of contribution is in teaching and, not as strong in the scholarship, but another person might be very strong in the scholarship and acceptable in the teaching, or something like that. But you're trying to show, you're trying to show your colleagues that this is a good long-term thing to do, to join in this community. We're well into Sanki's time here.
We are. Yeah, promotion. We'll jump to the helpful hints, and then Sanki can be ready to go. And we've already said this, communicate with your chair or unit director, whomever that may be, to get a sense of how people have been successful here in the past. Find trusted colleagues and triangulate that information so that you have a broad sense of, don't just listen to one voice. Make sure you get a sense of broadly how people have been successful. Understand the university priorities, and Paul mentioned that actually earlier, and those ebb and flow over time, but knowing that internationalization, undergraduate research, open educational resources, a host of things where you can find your niche, and then you build your case around how that you're adding value to the institution. Part of what we've done in the past here, when we had a little more time, was actually talk about resources to help you in faculty development, and there are, I think, some links maybe.
Yeah, the next slide still has it on there, but I don't think. But
and then have a plan. Have a plan for how you're going to move through. The ASR is part of that, but really think about, what is my scholarly agenda going to be? How do I get on the program? If presentations are valuable in my department, which in most departments they are, what's my plan for being on the program twice a year? What's my publication plan? Where's my publishing partner going to come from? Those sorts of things. And then keep a record. That was, Tony mentioned, this folio, this tenure folio is the most important thing you're going to do over time. So create a record-keeping process. Back in the old days, I had a little folder in my drawer, and it was just called a brag file. Every time I did something, I put it in my brag file, because then I could remember, okay, I presented here, I talked to this group, here's a publication, and then each year that became easier. Now, actually, you probably have an electronic brag file, which would make a lot more sense.
I still do paper.
Do you?
Yeah, but I divide it, because of the sections of the tenure folder, I divide it into research, teaching, and service, so that I have the,
And as silly as that sounds, you forget so quickly, even doing your annual report, you go, God, I know I went and talked to some groups, and I was involved in a project, and I took some students somewhere. Unless you write it down, it's gone. It's just gone. So we'll send some other stuff out to you.
My thing is only less than 10 minutes. So.
Okay, well, we've got 4 minutes left now. One of the things that we had done over the years ago was had the expectation of every unit having a faculty development handbook. And in the College of Health and Behavioral Sciences, we went away from that because it just didn't seem to be a good use of resource to make hard copies of things that changed routinely. And so what we ended up with is we created a College of Health and Behavioral Sciences resource guide, and that links to that, which is on our webpage, and it takes you, it has a link to the MOA, it has a link to the faculty handbook, it has a link to faculty development opportunities, it links into, I believe, the faculty development page, teaching innovation, learning technologies, and reassign time, and the grants office, etc. So, and I think Paul has one comparable. Just thinking about this made us think we probably need to do something more centralized institutionally. I know you have a page that's really a good page, but I'm not sure it fits as, that might be the right place for it.
The Tiger Lily blog?
Well, you've got the faculty development page that just has so many links and stuff. And that
it has everything from HR to payroll to
yeah.
It's just the faculty page.
And one thing we've historically mentioned in this group is getting a sense of the administrative calendar, the academic calendar. There are a host of dates and times, and faculty development's due on September 20th, and the next one's due on November 1, and you get $1,000 a year available to each faculty member to help support faculty development opportunities above and beyond what you may get from a department in college. So on the provost page, we have links to the academic calendar as well as the administrative calendar. The administrative calendar is chronological, as well as then there's a glossary at the bottom, so you can, what is the timeline for tenure? What is the timeline for annual performance review? And there's a host of things there that are of value. We better get out of Sam Key's way now.
Right.
Well, he's getting ready to roll. Any questions?
And I will go ahead and include that PowerPoint. Paul sent me an email of it, so I'll just go ahead and add it everywhere I can. Probably go on the blog, and then we can link from the blog.
Well, what my thing was to inform you about the course evaluation process. Wanted to make sure that you guys know how to get your course evaluation from the system. The systems that we're currently using is what we call the digital measures and TK20. Now, digital measures, we used to use that in main campus here for quite some years, but the company is basically pulling out from the course evaluation market, and we have to find something that replaces that. And since we're using TK20 in China programs, we've been using that for a couple of years. And this is a good opportunity to just combine all evaluation on one system. So at this particular semester, we're using 2 systems at the same time. And this is the last semester that we'll be using digital measures. So if I want to tell you, you can just know how to use it once and you can forget about it. So do you know how to get to that course evaluation? Okay, you've never seen that? So the way that you go to get your course evaluation is just going to type central. I hope I remember my password. Okay, and over here, on the upper right corner here, there is a this icon there, digital measure icon right there. There's two options. One is for activity insight. This is for faculty portfolio for the College of Business, and this one is called course evaluation. That you need to click on here, and it will take you to the digital measures site, and there is a report. You can just click on it, and course evaluation report, faculty name with course. So that's how you get your course evaluation results back. And then it'll ask you to what term. I don't think the fall 2017 fall is available yet. And then this is for whom, and what's the option. Since I don't teach any classes, I wish I could show you some classes, but I don't have anything to show you as an example. But anyway, that's how you get to the digital measure side for one semester. And then for TK20, it's a similar process where you can, this is the TK20 right here. The tooltip says TK20, it's right beside. And then you can just click on it, and again, log in there. I see more option than you do because I'm the administrator here, but you go to reports, and then course eval, and then there is a course evaluation 002 is a typical report that you use for seeing the results from your course evaluation. Just click on it, and then which term and course that you currently teach, and it will get you the course evaluation. So that's a simple process to get your course evaluation. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you about course evaluation is that, as our provost briefly mentioned, that our response rate, ever since probably we changed over to electronic version, the response rate has been kind of falling, and now it's hovering like 20% in main campus. For some reason, China is close to 80%. So the reason that China has so high response rate is because they make sure that course evaluation is done in class. So I think right now the best way to get your response rate high enough is to spend some core class time. So that while you have your students in your class, just ask them to use either phone or laptop if they have it, or just bringing in some cart full of laptops and just distribute them and have them fill out the course evaluation right there. I think that's the best way to get the course evaluation response rate high. If it is too low, then your course evaluation results may not be meaningful. And if you don't have the meaningful course response rate, I don't know how you can effectively show your quality of the instruction to anybody. That's just, so this is not, it's isolated. This is basically the entire campus. I think we have to do something about falling, yes.
How low would be considered low?
I don't know. I mean, 20% is already low.
Yes. I'll be honest, I've had like 8%
Yeah, that's just-
or lower. You know, I've had a class of 20 and had maybe 2 or 3 students complete my evaluation.
With the 2 or 3 students, just it's not usable, basically.
And what
Yes.
does the evaluation ask, or is it a standard evaluation for every
It's
class?
the same evaluation questions for everyone.
It asks about timeliness of grading, recommend the instructor, staying on course with the syllabus,
Student interaction.
yeah, increasing diversity, awareness of diversity and respect. There are, I think it's about 13 questions, 15, somewhere in there. And then for online virtual classes, there are some additional questions about like bookstore, technology, and those types of things that are sort of tagged on at the end.
I think it was developed a long time ago. I've been advocating that faculty should, you know, the group should take a look at, see how relevant that is for each different types of classes. Like you have not only online, on campus, lab courses, internship, and all these different kinds of classes need to have their own type of course evaluation so that we can really use that data to improve things.
And I'm also a faculty senator, to faculty senate. I sit on the University Affairs Committee. I'm the secretary of the University Affairs Committee. And that is one thing that we are trying to tackle this year, is T-VALs. One of the big concerns is low response rate.
Yes.
There are some loaded like questions in there. You know, your effort to put forth in this course is a question, and then, I mean, which is nice to know, but then one of the questions is about, would you recommend this instructor to others? And to some, that feels like a popularity thing, not maybe a quality of instruction thing. And there are other people who have some issues with, one of the questions says about timeliness of returning. Well, what's timely, right? You know, but other people like sort of the open, subjective nature of timeliness. So I know a colleague of mine do lots of research, or she has done quite a bit more than I have, on T-VALs, and you know, there are reliable measures out there. There are standardized measures. There are measures that are based on like how do you meet your learning objectives. So things like, there are lots of other options, I think, that faculty senate
We
wants to
may
explore.
want to look at how other universities are tackling the same issue and try to make our course evaluation questions a lot more meaningful for each of the type of the classes. And I think that's what we kind of need to work on.
Are there comments on the
Oh,
evals?
Yes, there are
or space for
open-ended,
comments?
yes, there are comment boxes.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes those are wonderful. I've gotten some really great feedback about, you know, why they didn't like the textbook or some things like that. And then I've gotten some, we'll just say, not so helpful comments back. Sometimes mean-spirited.
Yeah,
things.
if you don't promote or encourage students to fill out from all your students, is that one of the problem if you don't do that is what gets filled by students who had some axe to grind. I mean, that's, you know, so it kind of getting skewed towards a little bit negative. So you want to encourage a lot of students to fill out so that it gets everything out, even if there are some students who, you know, really want to get you. But
And there's also concern, I know some of my colleagues offer extra credit. So if you can prove that you've completed the T-VAL, we'll give you extra credit. But then what does that do? How does that bias the student against the person who doesn't give extra credit? Because I hear in my classes all the time,
that's typically not
well, Dr.
recommended.
So-and-so, I'm like, well, now I have to. you know, or I'm gonna look
no,
like a heel.
I've heard.
Not unless asked. Not unless I'm going to be honest, not unless I hear Dr. So-and-so Because then I don't want them to come back and do it anyway because, well, Dr. So-and-so gave me 5 points extra credit for, you know, I also teach a class that has like 1,000 points in it. What's 5 points of extra credit going to do for you in the grand scheme of things?
Well,
but if it makes you feel better.
I heard other institutions are trying, like, unless students fill out their evaluation, their grade, they can't view the grade. They are given the grade, it's on the record, but they can't view the grade fast enough. It'll be eventually show up, but you know, typically students want to see their grades right away after everything's done. But they may have to wait till like 10 days until you know they are able to do it. We got to do something similar so that you know everybody can motivated to fill this out.
And the bringing, you know, using some class time would work great for on-campus courses, but then how do we do all the virtual, and now more of us are teaching virtual.
True.
How?
Particularly when our university case is virtual, the proportion of virtual credit hours is huge. But more than 60% of our students are virtual students only. So that's going to be an issue too. The last point that I'm trying to promote while I have provost and dean and everybody, faculty representatives here, is that it's related to the tenure promotion process, is that I'm trying to promote the all those brag files. Instead of keeping it, you either paper form or electronic form in some directory in network drives or personal drives. We have a system. TK20 has a system to enter those information electronically and store as a database so that you can take it around. As soon as you have something to put in as a brag file, you can just log in there and then put that in so that you don't forget it. So you can't lose it once it's been there. Sometimes even if you put in your file system, what did I say? I mean, it's just sometimes it's different names and it got somehow deleted, or you can forget it, gets deleted and damaged or whatever. But once that information is in this system, you can even take this one around if you happen to go to a different institution, because TK20 is a nationwide company, and this has definitely benefit for you to use it, and it's easy to keep things organized. And nursing, the department is already using what they call the faculty qualification over here, so that you can enter your research scholarly, paper presentations, and everything that you can imagine can log into here, so that you can just keep things organized, and instead of looking for everything when time is up for your evaluation, but everything is ready here to create a report. Once everything is here, you can easily pull the report out of this so that it can be already in a report form, organized. So service, grants, experience, and everything that if for some reason that you don't find anything that fits your work, we can modify it, customize it so that you can have something like this.
And I assume that I could make a PDF with like a really nice thank you note that a student wrote.
Yeah, so you can put that in here. I don't know. I've heard that there's some resistance to use some kind of system. They prefer to do it in paper. Why is that? I don't know.
I was about to ask. Well,
yeah.
When's the next step where this is submitted electronically?
I think all would have. We've been around about the same amount of time when we've actually had the electronic potential problem. There's been of course, we've had the digital measures for 10 years, and I think there's been. I was just going to ask Jeanette from an AAUP perspective. How far down the road do you think before we will actually submit our folios electronically? Yeah. That seems like a no-brainer to to most of us?
I mean, I think it's open. The MOA does say written, does it just say
There's a reference
document?
to electronic in there.
Yes, but it also does have a line in there about electronic, because I know a lot of the things that we send can also be done electronically. You know, at one point, your letters of appointment had to be done paper-based, and now they can be done electronically. So a lot of those places that does have the option for electronic. The big concern that I'm hearing is just that we had digital measures, now we're switching to something else, and I was here before digital measures started, and I think there's just a general, how long is this new fancy
Like the
thing?
platform.
Well,
Yeah.
even if there is some change, you can easily download your stuff and port it to different system. These days, systems are thinking of that so that they could attract some other clients from universities that are using different system. They build it so that you can just package it, move it, and just pop right into the different system. So it's not that. And I don't see, you know, there's lots of benefits to that.
It'll be done before these folks are tenured.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
I mean, I don't think it's
I believe so.
Yeah, I don't, from an AAUP perspective, I don't see it being off the table. I think there's some little things that need to be worked out as far as.
The reason that I'm particularly interested in implementing something like this is because my office sometimes has to prove our effectiveness in terms of, as an institution, in terms of research, teaching, and service. If I don't have a database like this one, it would be asking each one of you to submit something so that we can say to either HLC or external accreditation that this is how effective or productive our faculties are, or as an institution, this is how much we've achieved. Without this in place, it would be impossible to prove anything to anybody, basically. So that's what I'm kind of.
So you're saying even at the upper levels, this database is an advantage to you, not just a convenience
Not
to
just,
us.
it's a win-win for you, for us, to prove that, you know, once everything in here, we can easily pull reports. You know, how many research papers, how many presentations, how many, you know, undergraduate research done, or how many anything. And also, one of the benefits using the TK20 as a platform is that course evaluation now is done here. I think it's a way to pull the course evaluation information into your file. So that's another benefit. We're currently paying a lot of money to use this TK20, but at this point, the usage is really, really low. So that's what I'm trying to promote. Whenever I have a chance to talk to faculty, this is my soapbox, and try to promote the system so that we can be a little more systematic. Yes.
So if we use this database, are we just uploading like a title of an article or a link to an article? Or
Let's take a look.
Is it just
Research
text?
scholarly, you know, paper presentation. There's a year, title, status, subcategory, and scope. That's it right now. But I think.
So just a description of the activity?
Or
a title of
if,
the paper?
if you wanted to actually attach a document, I think we can do so. So that's.
That'd be kind of cumbersome to put inside of the database. Linking to it would probably be better.
Probably.
That's
Links.
some of the,
Yeah.
probably the kinks
Yeah.
that, because in the tenure file, they do want to see, if you write a
Originals.
manuscript, they want to see that in your file, so.
But if you're copying that manuscript and three-hole punching it, it'd
Right.
be just as easy to scan it and upload
Right,
it as a PDF
right.
and have it there for perpetuity.
Right, and I think that's one of those little links, little glitches we would need to work out, is make sure that we are able
Yeah,
to just.
I'm just saying for a database to work efficiently, that you wouldn't want like a PDF inside the database. You'd want that probably to link to something to make the database run efficiently. It would kind of bog
Since
it
nursing
down.
department is spearheading all of this particular feature, we'll see what the issues are, what's the things that we need to improve. We'll see how that results comes out. So unless we use it, we don't know what would be the best way to handle this.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, and thank you all of you for coming over.
If you have specific needs, thoughts, let Nicole know,
That's
and
next Thursday or
we can
Friday.
work